A special good night to all of our viewers tonight. Welcome again to another episode of Political Discussion. And tonight we'll be talking about making sense of politics in Guyana, as we are all been at our edge for the last 4 months, trying to figure out and make sense of what's happening in Guyana. This is a live program, of course. On Globespan. We want to give special thanks to those who are working hard behind the scene to make these shows possible. Mr. Nohar Singh and his team, led by Devin. And we want to also encourage all those who are looking that these show does come at a cost. There are people behind, there are technology that are being used. So if you can, go to Globespan 24x7, 24 times 7, and make a donation to keep these shows going. These shows play an important role in bringing the sides together, bringing the discussion to the table, and ensuring that we can have some sensible discussion about them. This is not a political party show. In fact, this show is apolitical. We try as much as we can to bring the views as independent as possible, and to get guests who are from all sides and can share different perspective on the issue. Guyana itself is a very diverse landscape with different people and different flavors, and we want to ensure that all those different flavors and those different perspectives are represented on these shows. Tonight, our guests are Bishop Edghill, Bishop Juan Edghill, who is no stranger. He is a member of the PPP and an advocate, and certainly plays an important role in ensuring that his party gets a win in the impasse that we have right now. And on our guest, I think, and this is maybe his second or third time on Globespan, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. James McAllister. He was an executive of the PNC. He currently is a supporter by definition, and he's an avid writer on race and politics in Guyana. And I believe he lives now in New York. Welcome, both of you, to this special edition of Globespan, where we'll be talking about making sense of Guyanese politics.
Thank you.
Good. So,
good evening, Salim, and good evening, James.
Good evening to both of you, and good evening to our listeners.
Right. And these shows, like it is, I mean, like I said at the beginning, this is not a political show, so you're not coming here to kind of talk to your supporters and rile up your supporters. What you're trying to do with these shows is trying to bring the issue and as much as we can provide some insight into why things are happening and how we need to get out of them. A lot happened today, of course. You know, we've had a court case that was intended to prevent any further reporting or declaration by GCOM. And while that was happening, we've had sanctions being announced by the U.S. On persons within the administration, the coalition. You know, there were some tough words being used by the U.S. I saw some tough words being used by the CARICOM chairman, words such as abuse of process and the court system, you know, hijacking an election and hijacking the country. You know, so there's quite a lot that happened today. And I want to bring you in, James, as our one of our newest guests today. And you are a supporter of the PNC and APNU coalition government. What do you make of these sanctions, and how serious are these sanctions on these individuals, on the party, and what on the impasse that we are experiencing?
Well, I think that the sanctions are indeed a serious development. However, It is not something that was unexpected. This is the way in which these Western countries operate when they try to coerce sovereign states to bend to their will. And therefore, we can expect that. But then we'll have to ask ourselves, if officials in Guyana, the members of the government, members of the judiciary, if they are going to bend to the will of foreign states because of the fear of the loss of a visa. We have a process where the laws in Guyana are being followed. We're going through that process, and we have to respect the laws of Guyana. When we look at some of these other countries, we've had cases where they follow their laws when things appear to be wrong. You can remember the Gore-Bush event. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. Everyone knows that Gore won those elections. He won it he won Florida. But the Supreme Court said, hey, it's Bush. For whatever reason they did it. It was accepted here in the United States. And similarly, they should allow our process to work. Okay? And so therefore, I would say that the sanctions are unfortunate. But at the same time, I expect officials in Guyana to follow the law, to be faithful and loyal to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
Yeah.
And to do their duty in that regard.
Do you believe that powers around the world, including the U.S., who made the strongest of all the sanctions, do you believe that they have given Guyanese quite a lot of time to figure out their democratic process? I mean, it started in 2018 on December 12th or 21st or something until today. So I think they've given Guyanese a fair opportunity to kind of let the process work. Is it unfair for them to make such a statement at this very, very late stage when all Guyanese are very, very anxious to move forward?
Well, I would say it's unfortunate, and here's why. You're saying that they gave Guyana a lot of time since 2018, okay? But I would want to see that a bit differently. I'll point to three events. First is the no confidence motion and Charandas Prasad's vote, okay? That was shrouded in all sorts of suspicion of corrupt transactions, okay? If something like that had happened in England, if it had happened in Canada, if it had happened in the United States, where someone supposedly was suspected of receiving some kind of reward to cast a vote like that, there would have been a major investigation. And possibly that person would have been sentenced and jailed. Okay? At that point in time, when the issue went to the court, and the government attempted to invalidate the vote, the court ruled that the vote was valid. Notwithstanding all of those suspicions, these very countries said that was your law. That is your law. You have to accept it. Regardless of what, the government accepted the decision. It acted in accordance with the law. When we had the issue of the bloated list, for months upon months, the government campaigned against that list. We know, one would know, that in democracies around the world, a list that flawed will never be accepted. Okay? We went to court. First the Chief Justice, then the Court of Appeal ruled against us. Because they say, based on the laws of Guyana, you have to live with the corrupt list. Mm-hmm. We accepted that because it was the law. Now we have the situation with the declaration of the election results. Okay? And we are going to court again to have an interpretation of the law. But all of a sudden, these people who all along were saying to the government, you must accept it because it is the law, are now saying, forget about the law. Here is our instruction. Here's what you must do. And they're even going further than that. They're issuing threats to officers of the court. How could we as Guyanese accept that? How could we allow officials in a foreign state to sit in their capital and tell our officers of the court, if you don't do what we say, you are going to feel punishment?
And that's a good question. Let's move to the bishop. Today, Rav Gonzalez, as part of this entire day of busy political activity, he mentioned that going back to the courts is almost an abuse of the process and abuse of the courts. Do you believe that these sanctions were just about visa alone, or is it meant to put pressure on the courts and GCOM and so on, as is being peddled by some of the coalition voices?
Well, Salim, before I even attempt to answer that, let me respond to my friend James in correcting. Number one, he mentioned about the process that would have gone with a no confidence vote about the suspicions of Charandas. The Minister of Public Security, who had a vested interest because it was from his party that Charandas was from, and there was a police investigation. And nothing of the sort to show that Charandas was corrupted to vote in the manner in which he voted was found. There was no evidence that came to the public. It was used as an excuse by the APNU-AFC to even not want to obey the Constitution, Articles 106, to give up power and to have an election. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I have not seen anywhere any threat to the judiciary or the imposition of pressure on the judiciary. I have not seen that or heard that anywhere. If somebody is offering an opinion or seeking to extend what Mr. Pompeo says to include judiciary, that's a personal opinion. But I think the target of visa revocations and restrictions of travel is in the first instance target towards those who are frustrating the declaration, and secondly, those who will be the beneficiaries of a fraudulent declaration. The bottom line is all of Guyana knows who won these elections. We have a stubborn administration who is unwilling to cede power, to concede their defeat, and to subscribe to democratic norms and democratic principles. In a democracy, for example, in the CARICOM, there's a charter of civil society. All the countries of CARICOM says, if you're going to be part of CARICOM, this is how you're going to behave. This is what you're going to do. These are principles that we're going to uphold. To be a part of the OAS, the Organization of American States, we sign on to certain things. And one of the things that we sign on to is to our belief in democracy and the promotion of democracy. The actions that are being taken and will continue to be taken until there is compliance are actions that every member of these organizations, based upon the charter, can expect. So it is not something that is presumptuous or unknown to the persons who are going to be violators of these charters and these principles. The fact of the matter, when the CCJ pronounced on these matters not so long ago, I think July 8th, it was clear as day what needs to take place. Number one, the votes that should be used for the final declaration are the votes that were certified at the recount. Number two, the chief elections officer must comply with the instructions that was given to him by the chairperson of GCOM on June 16 and produce a report in keeping with those instructions. What we have is a chief elections officer who is compromised with the defeated government. It is as clear as day. He is compromised and a part of the rigging cabal. In the first instance, he refused to bring out the statements of poll since March 6th that could have settled all of these issues. He allowed Mingo's fraud. He submitted a report to GCOM with Mingo's fraud. Mingo's fraud was revealed at the recount. Some 22,000 votes that didn't exist, Mingo was able to manipulate. We got the numbers. We had the narrative, fraud is fraud. Mr. Lowenfield took out, in the first instance, 285,000 votes. Then he submitted another report where he invalidated 115,000 votes. Then in his latest report, he did not only put in back the 115,000 invalidated votes, but he added on a 15,000 votes that were nowhere to be found in the boxes at the time of the recount.
Correct. And so, I guess we can relitigate and bring those things up, but everyone knows those.
So going to court is an abuse of process.
Yeah.
It's buying time. It is ridiculous. It's insulting the collective intelligence of all the people of Guyana, including APNU-AFC supporters. It is insulting the collective intelligence of all the observers, the international missions that were here, who saw, wrote their reports, reported to the world about what happened. What is taking place is an insult to the collective intelligence.
Juan, you can't go on forever.
Go ahead.
You must stop at some point in time.
Go ahead, James. You were shaking your head.
Yeah. Okay, just let me respond to a couple points Juan made. I'll be brief. One, we can agree to disagree on the Charandas fraud issue in relation to no confidence motion. I hold to the position that there I hold to the position that there was enough suspicion surrounding Charanda's vote for there to be a full-blown investigation. And if it had happened in any other jurisdiction, it would have been a major investigation.
But your party and government launched police investigation.
James, can you give us an idea why? Because you said you were a supporter of the PNC. Why didn't the PNC go deeper into an investigation? If you say if in any other country there would be an investigation, so why didn't APNU administration?
For one, the man ran. Okay, he ran because he did not want to answer the questions.
But that does not prevent an investigation, would it?
It would have allowed him to be confronted by evidence and facts and to give his explanation. He left the jurisdiction. Okay, and so therefore we have to conclude that there's enough suspicion around his vote. Okay, so we can agree to disagree on that. On the issue of pressure on the judiciary, I don't know if you can remember one, but on the day the CCJ was meeting the last time, Pompeo came out with a statement about people who are obstructing democracy and so on and things like that will be sanctioned. And then
that is the APNU-AFC government.
Hold a minute, allow me to finish my point. You notice I listened to you very carefully. Now, then when the CCJ, rather when the Chief Justice was having a case management session for this latest filing, he comes out again. Is it coincidental that whenever the court is sitting, you have the American Secretary of State coming out and issuing statements about what will happen to, I believe that the justices at the CCG, not being Guyanese, they ain't fetching water for Guyanese. They just roll over to the American threats and issued a ruling in keeping with what the Americans signaled that they wanted. Okay, and we haven't it again, but on this occasion, we'll have to hope that the Chief Justice is, being a Guyanese, will not rule in the same way. So I don't think you can correctly say that there's no evidence of a threat to the judiciary. This is not coincidental. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, you made a lot of points about the ruling of the CCG and what should have happened and what Lowenfield should have done, and etc. But I want to point to one thing. When GCOM Chairman Justice Retired Claudia Singh asked Lowenfield to produce the report in keeping with the recount numbers, he sent her a letter seeking clarification, and she refused. I would want to know if she, being a legal luminary of such standing, was so clear in the CCG ruling, it would have been easy for her to say to him, CEO, here is the legal basis for my instruction to you. And then he would have had no choice but to proceed. But on 2 occasions, she refused to give the justification. And if a legal person can't find a legal justification for an instruction that she's given, I would want to conclude that that justification doesn't exist. But the court is going to determine whether that is the case. But we notice the Americans are not trying to put the thumb on the scale. You made a lot of reference to the Mingo issue. I want to say this. The Mingo issue has been overtaken.
So we can talk about it?
Yeah, you can talk about it. Okay. But I will talk about the corruption that we found in the Bob's during the recount. Okay?
But
and
alleged corruption, unsubstantiated claims.
One, I'm not hearing the other question.
No, I was asking you, James, do you at least accept at this stage of the game that what transpired during the Mingo episode was an attempt at fraud?
I don't know that for sure. It could be that Mingo made a genuine mistake. It could be that Juan and his colleagues, their arrogant approach to the man caused him to dig in his heels. We don't know that Mingo, well, I know for sure that Mingo didn't sit for 6 months or a year planning to do what happened. It's possible it was a mistake, and a proud man, he decided that he's not going to be embarrassed. But the other issues that we found in the box.
But the issues in the box, and I will want to get Bishop back into this. The issues in the box, which is something that has been thrown on as being PPP's fraud. Much of it has not been substantiated. There's been no evidence, and so on. Bishop,
let me just say, Salim.
No.
Let me just say this.
Let me
Mingo made 2 declarations.
Let me just say.
Mingo made 2 declarations. Both of those declarations did not represent the will of the people. The numbers had no basis upon the votes that were found in the box. Lowenfield has submitted 3 times numbers, and none of those numbers that he has submitted represented the will of the people. 5 times, 2 senior officials in GCOM, working in concert with the governing party that is unwilling to give up power, has produced fictitious numbers to put themselves in government when they would have lost an election. This you want to cry about what was found in the box. If there were no poll books, the poll books are in the possession of GCOM that they did not produce any recount. All the documents that did not go into those 40-something boxes were handed over to DREOs, to the RO, to the chief elections officer. It was GCOM who did not present those things during the recount. You cannot fault the PPPC for what was not found in a box when Lowenfield, the same man who has gone rogue, unwilling to comply with instructions of the commission, trying to use spurious, vexatious legal arguments to avoid the proper declaration. And you don't expect the world to frown upon that, James. The people of the world, their collective intelligence have been insulted by these maneuvers, aided and abetted by the party that you support. And no amount of explanation, no amount of spin doctoring, no amount of going around in circles will change the fact that the PPPC won these elections and the APNU-AFC wants to steal these elections, and they're using GCOM and compliant officials within GCOM to declare numbers that does not exist in fact or in reality. And all the international community is saying, we're going to sanction people who behave in such a way. And that is standard around the world. So we could jump high, we could jump low. That is the crux of the matter.
James, the bishop just accused the coalition of wanting to steal the election. Ralph Gonzalez, the chairman of CARICOM, talked about hijacking an election and hijacking the country. Why would APNU want to deface itself at this time of its early development? It's only been a one-term government. Why would it want to deface itself by being accused of these things? And it's gotten deeper than the accusation, because you've got an avalanche of organizations around the world and even in Guyana and powers around the world that is descending upon APNU and saying, hey, it's time that you allow the process to reach the end. Why would APNU want to hold out for such a long time?
Because APNU is confident and has evidence that the PPP perpetrated fraud. Now, listen, this is not a normal situation where we had an election and we had a count, and then the government started to make a fuss and say something's wrong with the numbers. We actually had a recount. We have evidence of hundreds of dead people voting. Okay? Now,
allegations, not evidence.
We have evidence. We have evidence. And because death certificates were produced. Okay? People out of the jurisdiction voted. Now, what does this represent? One might want to say to us that, okay, you only found 3,000, but we supposedly won by 15,000. I'm saying that 3,000 is evidence of a voter impersonation campaign that took place in certain areas in which the PPP enjoys tremendous support. And so if we were to find 3,000 mistakes, because I don't believe that Juan and those guys will go there to deliberately vote for dead people. Okay? Those are the mistakes that occur during the campaign. And I will say for every single dead person we found, you probably have 25, 30 other votes that
but
were
James,
cast improperly.
Explain to our viewers why none of the court cases to date, including the one today, was never about the real issue of these quote-unquote fraud by the PPP and the dead voters and so on. It has always been about preventing a report from reaching the chairwoman or her not making a declaration? Why is it never? Why aren't these evidence in front of the courts at the moment?
No, I think you're incorrect to say it was about presenting the report, effort to prevent the report, because numerous reports were submitted to GCOM, at least 3. So it was this whole issue of the report surfaced when the chairman of GCOM refused to give clarification on the legal basis for her instruction. Okay? And look, we have a situation with these elections, and this is my position. You have 2 flawed numbers. You have the flawed number that we established during the recount as relates to Mingo, and we have the flawed and inflated numbers of the PVP votes that we have clear evidence that there was a voter impersonation campaign that inflated those votes significantly. Now, how do we decide how we move forward? How do we decide what is the path to government? Okay, PVP wants to say, look, my flawed votes, my corrupt votes are better than yours, and so therefore I should be sworn in, and everyone is supporting me. We're going to come back to that. Everyone is supporting me in a short while. I am saying, however, that the way to proceed with this is based on what the law of Guyana says. And if the law says that original declaration is what we must go with, then we should go with it. I will note that very early, maybe on the 5th or 6th of March or something like that, President Granger said that if, and we didn't have the recount at that time, and we had the declarations, he said, if the recount establishes that there's problem in the count, he was prepared to call it new elections. Okay? And I'm quite sure if we had gone through the recount and we didn't unearth the evidence of PVP fraud to the extent in which we did, you would have had a different attitude. But the fact is, what has happened, you went in there to address Mingo's issues, and you emerged with issues greater than Mingo, because at the best, Mingo, what happened with Mingo is either a mistake or something spontaneous. But what we have seen in the boxes there, it took months and probably years of planning to execute. And this is here you have a situation where an entire political party went into the process to cheat. And you're trying to say to us that, okay, even though we caught you, you should be allowed to assume office, even though legally there's no path for you to do so. And you want to say that, okay, what is happening? The EU says that we should be it. The Americans said that we should be it. And therefore, let us bend the laws of Guyana and allow you to go in.
And Bishop, is the PVP bending any law to assert its winning position in the election? What is your position on some of the allegations of fraud? And I know this has been a long while, but maybe some of our viewers still needs to understand, some of these accusations upon the PPP. What is the position?
Salim, I've always admired James as a well-read gentleman, and he has written very well. But James is attempting to defend something that cannot be defended, and he's having the job of the lawyers, those high-priced lawyers that APNU has been able to hire over the last several cases that they've all lost. So James is trying his best. But let me just say this and put in chronicle. The PPP has no corrupt votes. We had an election. This election was managed by GCOM with Keith Lowenfield as the chief elections officer. All 10 of the returning officers were appointed by Keith Lowenfield under his signature and gazetted as the chief elections officer. They are statutory officers. All the presiding officers, the assistant presiding officers were appointed by GCOM with Keith Lowenfield as the chief elections officer. Every political party put at the polling place agents to represent their interests. They had a folio which had the photograph and the name of everybody who attended to vote. They had a list. Everybody was there to ensure that process was carried out. The night of the election, statements of poll were prepared, signed, and they went to all the political parties. When the PNC got their statements of poll, they recognized that they lost the elections. And they had to do something to stay in power. Mr. Mingo was the agent that was being used in the first instance. It was no mistake, like James is trying to say. It was calculated and well set. A deduction from the PPP and inflation of the APNU-AFC. All of those figures were proven to be accurate of what Mingo did during the recount.
And that would have been reflected through SOPs that you...
SOPs, and you could compare that now with the SORs.
Yeah,
but I want to say...
And that would have reflected also GCOM's SOPs, and I know,
yes,
I know James, the APNU never presented their SOPs.
I never wanted to. I never will. Anyway, let me conclude this.
And what?
At the time of the recount, I was one of the counting agents, James. You know why I went into the count? Because I wanted to bear testimony to this wickedness that people are seeking to defend. The wickedness that people are seeking to defend that the PPP did something wrong. Let me tell you what your agents did. When we count in South Georgetown, because I counted Region 4, no allegations of anybody dead, no allegations of anybody being out in the country are being made. But when you're counting a stronghold of the PPP, you're calling out 105 names to check to see if they voted. And when you found 2, you said, well, those 2 were out in the country. We will provide evidence later. This person was dead. They were all spurious allegations in a fishing expedition to seek to create a narrative. But just to remind you, when Mingo's figures were declared, and we didn't agree with them because of the statements of poll that were in our possession, we requested a recount, and 8 other political parties requested a recount. Mingo denied every political party a recount of the Region 4 votes. And that showed clearly it was no mistake. If a man makes a mistake, he would be prepared to go back and count it over and get it corrected. When it's deliberate, you avoid the recount. It was pressure, including pressure from CARICOM, headed by Mia Motley and the 4 other prime ministers that came, that caused Granger to agree to a recount. I sat in the meeting with Barjag Deone Fanali and others when the CARICOM heads of governments were here. So I know the discussion. So when Granger made the request, it was because of pressure. It was your party, the APNU-AFC, that used Ulita Moore, a candidate, to stop the recount. It was your party, when the recount was finished and the numbers were declared that showed that the PPPC won these elections by 15,416 votes, valid certified votes, not corrupted votes, valid certified votes. You used Eslin David to go to the Court of Appeal to create a scenario to be able to deduct votes to give the PNC-led APNU-AFC a win. It is now your party again, by Mrs. Jones, that is going to the court to prevent Claudette Singh and the GCOM from doing its work of declaring the rightful winner. Don't steal. And when you get catch stealing, you go to the court to complain, man, look, these people want me to steal. Because that's exactly what the PNC is doing. You were caught stealing an election and you were blocked on every occasion from stealing it. Now you're complaining you're not getting to steal it because the way I could finally steal it is by Lowenfield making a report that has nothing to do with the numbers that were certified during the period of the recount. And that's where we are. So no amount of explanation and going around in circles would change that reality. And it's time we bring the charade to an end. It's time we bring the charade to an end.
Well, look, you know, let's have an analogy of cricket here. You know, Juan, back a few years ago, before we had the television review of dismissals, Brian Lara, on many occasions, would ask the field in the slip, do you catch it? And based on the word of the opposing fielder, he would walk. And sometimes when batsmen refuse to move, when the wicketkeeper or a closing fielder say, I caught it, he would be deemed unsportsmanlike. Okay? But now we have reviews whereby we can go through a process and we can see exactly what happened. Did he play the ball before it hit the pad? Okay? And then, even though the umpire had given the batsman out, the review will then show that no. So a batsman refusing to move before the review is not unsportsmanlike. And similarly, if the review shows that the batsman was not out and he continued to bat, that is not trying to steal the match. That is operating within the rules. Now, we have had a situation, like I said, these elections are not like other elections where we never had an opportunity to know what's in the box before the declaration. Okay? We now have an opportunity to know what's in the box, not only about the amount of ballots in the box. We have an idea as to how those ballots got there. Okay? You might want to say that, okay, the APNU didn't object to thing in their area, they only object in ours. One, it's simple. They didn't do research in their area. They did research in yours. Because that is where they thought that the fraud
to create a narrative. Yeah. To create a narrative.
It was for you to do the research in their area and to make a determination as to what exactly happened. Mm-hmm. Now, you would want to hold on these numbers, and you would want to say that that is justification for you claiming that you won these elections. And the APNU-AFC is pointing to the evidence of the fraud. And Salim, you said earlier on that there's no evidence that exists. And I don't believe that we can...
There might be evidence, and all I'm saying, the evidence is not in front of the courts, or there is no one producing evidence. There might be, there's evidence...
Okay, but the fact of the matter is, now that we know that evidence is there, now that we know that you have to go to court, fair enough, let the PVP go to court. You have the evidence about Mingo numbers, etc. Go to court. If the process right now is the original declaration must stand, well, if the law says so, well, then that is it.
So if I know one of the contentions of the current case is to go back to the original counts. So why did APNU go along and agree to get CARICOM involved for the recount?
Because
and now that the recount has not been in their favor, they're like, hey, let's go back to the original.
No. You are misrepresenting it here. The recount process was truncated because the recount order did not only deal with the counting of ballots, it deals with the certification of the ballots. And as soon as the count was completed, the PVP abandoned the process and said the PPP would have contested.
At what stage did the
So
PPP
you were
abandon the
part of
process?
You abandoned the process after the count. You did
When
not.
was that?
You did not participate in the review of the observation reports.
That is
Okay.
a matter for GCOM. That is a matter for GCOM, not the PPP.
You had to wait for GCOM to complete that process. But no, you did not do that. As soon as the count was finished, you started to shout that you won based on these numbers. When you
The world saw the numbers.
No. One.
The world saw 15,416
you
more votes.
signed on to an agreement that said that you're going to have a count and then you're going to certify the ballots.
The ballots were certified at the tabulation center and signed off by all the political parties.
Well, as it turned out, GCOM,
all they feel was supposed to do is to take 10 numbers, add them together, and carry them to GCOM.
No. GCOM has been able to put together observation reports. The summary of those reports showed a litany of fraud, and based on that, initially, initially, Lorenfield said these elections aren't credible. Okay? And I think at that point in time, he was saying, I think as an election professional, that look, these things aren't credible. We have to do it again. The PPP refused that, even though they agreed to an order.
I'm not aware of what you're trying to say tonight, McAllister. Never happened. Never happened.
One, it was about
from my recollection, and just from the public's perspective, the request by the chairwoman is for a report and not for a verification or a fourth stage. It was for her to get her report so she can make a declaration based on those reports. Those reports, of course, have never been presented or have never been available or have been, a skewed report.
Why are you saying that? You shouldn't say that, okay? Because you're misrepresenting what happened.
That is what is public knowledge.
No, well, I don't know why you say it's public knowledge. The chief election officer gave rationale for every single report he submitted to the chairman of GCOM. In the first instance, he came and he said, based on what I've seen, these things aren't credible. Okay, this election is not credible. Okay, the second time around, he submitted a report that says that based on the valid votes, hold a minute, based on the valid votes, this is what, and he did that, he did that after the PPP refused the scenario that says the elections are not of the quality that we can be proud of.
He did that after the Court of Appeal ruling, saying that his justification was a ruling from the Court of Appeal which give no guidance nor direction to invalidate any votes. That is why we end up to the CCJ. McAllister, I think you're too far from Guyana. Welcome back home. Come home and sit in the seat of understanding what is taking place, and you'll be able to represent these issues better. That is when he did that.
Bishop, I want to bring back the whole issue of the CEO. I know the PPP firmly believes that he is compromised, that much of what he says and does emanates from Congress Place.
Let me interject here. I don't think I can allow you to lead the question like that. I have never
give us the perspective of the PPP as to why they believe the CEO is compromised.
Well, I have spoken to this matter over and over again, but let me just outline it why I believe. Number one, the representation of the People's Act and all the procedures that allows for election. Every statement of poll that is prepared at a polling station, a copy, an original copy, goes to the chief elections officer. In every electoral district and an original copy goes to the returning officer. It means at all material times, a very senior functionary of GCOM would be the custodian of the accurate numbers of all 2,339 polling stations. When problems arose with District 4 and the call was made for Mr. Lowenfield to bring out his original statements of poll to correct whatever was taking place, he refused. At that stage, we knew he was compromised. But before the election started, Bishop Juan Edghill spoke about concerns of Mr. Lowenfield after the passage of the no confidence vote, when a government was defeated and fallen, received a parcel of 2 acres of land from a defeated government at Mocha, and another parcel of 200 plus acres of land at Millie's hideout at the Linden-Soosdijk Highway. And I ask, is that proper for a man who is going to be the chief elections officer to receive from a defeated government land to that extent? Is this a case of conflict of interest or being compromised? No. Mr. Lowenfield hurriedly, without bringing out his statements of poll, submitted a report to Claudette Singh for a swearing in of David Granger. Even before we got to the recount, we went to the court, blocked Mingo's first declaration. The Chief Justice says it must be done using the statements of poll. Lowenfield moved the operation from Ashman's building to his office at High Street, Kingston, where they put up a bed sheet, where the rigging was worse than what took place at Ashman's building. So even if Mingo was the culprit at Ashman's, Lowenfield at GCOM's headquarters could have put down his foot and say, hey, stop this. The Chief Justice has already ruled, but the numbers became worse. Everything was being done before the elections to stymie the holding of elections. Even though it was supposed to be held in 90 days, it was 14 months after we had an elections. When Claudette Singh came in as the chairman and truncated the house-to-house registration, Lowenfield put on additional teams and extra hours to accelerate house-to-house registration before the gazetted order for its shutting down could have taken place. He was at all material times carrying out the instructions of Vincent Alexander and the other commissioners at GCOM from the PNCR and Congress Place. And we have seen his actions throughout this whole period of seemingly wanting to make fictitious declarations. And every time a declaration is being made by Lowenfield or a report is being made by Lowenfield, is to make the APNU-AFC win an election that they have lost. He is compromised.
James, your response to that, is Lowenfield compromised?
Lowenfield is beyond reproach. Beyond reproach. We have 10 declarations that were made by the ROs. Lowenfield is now required to compile those declarations and make a national declaration. Okay. I am a bit surprised that one would want to suggest that someone like Lowenfield, who served this country for all his life in various positions, is not entitled to a piece of land from the government.
Entitlement is proper thing. That's entitlement.
Juan, I listened to you carefully. You're trying to say that he's not entitled to a piece of land.
Never said.
I reject that. I reject that. And this is the entire attitude of the PPP. Why you have people reacting to people like that, because you want to determine who is entitled to largesse from the state and who's not. Okay? When you point to Lowenfield. Lowenfield didn't go work for the APNU-AFC. Do Not Sing did. Do not serve as the chairman of GCOM, and then a few weeks after you were standing in Parliament as the Attorney General for the PPP. Gokul Boudou, who served as the CEO, he and Stanley Singh also, both of them subsequently went and worked with the PPP. Now, I don't know, and I don't believe that Lowenfield would any time in the future be aligned with the AFC APNU. Okay, this man is a professional who's doing his job as he sees it according to the law. He asked the chairman, please, madam, give me a clarification of the legal basis for your instruction, and she could not. Now, what she wanted to take him and make him a little boy to say, you shut your mouth, don't ask me that, you just give me the report that I asked you for? No, you would not accept that one. You would not accept that. And why would you want Lowenfield to accept as a professional? Okay? He's saying to her, give me the legal basis for your instruction. Because he, based on all of his reports, he is convinced that the election is flawed, that the PP commit fraud, and he cannot properly go to the recount since the law does not allow for it. Now, I'm quite sure that the path that Lowenfield is taking is going to be the most democratic path. And here's why. Because that path that we're talking about, we know that there's going to be an election petition. And we know you're going to count the ballots, so you're going to come and you're going to see whatever is this. And then once that is held up in court, the court will say new elections. But I heard you here tonight, Juan. I heard you here. And it's in keeping with the PP's narrative, where you said that there is no fraud, where you said there's no evidence. And during the recount, when the evidence was being revealed, when people were publicizing death certificates and immigration records, no less than the General Secretary of the PPP threatened those persons that they will be jailed. Okay? It shows clearly what's the PPP's intention. That if you are allowed to put your hands on power, let me speak. If you're allowed to put your hands on power, what you're going to do, you're going to destroy all the evidence. You're going to corrupt the whole process, and you're going to try to survive for 5 years on the basis of that fraud that took place in the last elections. But no, we have to go according to the law. And right now, the matter is in the hands of the courts, and the courts will determine what is the law. You have no moral authority to say to the APNU-AFC that your numbers are flawed and therefore we should be sworn in, because your numbers are flawed. And we have evidence of that. And right now we don't know if it's flawed by 20, 30, or 40,000. But what we know is that the evidence exists that there was a voter impersonation campaign all across the country, okay, which give you a number of tens of thousands of votes. And that's our position.
But
the thing is,
I want to extend that question again. If Lowenfield is the CEO and by extension he's the operational director of the entire election, isn't he indicting himself when he comes out and say that this is flawed and I can't make a pronouncement? Why wasn't he picking this up as the CEO, as the guy who has his fingers on the pulse of the election process?
You know, some of the guidelines they didn't originate with Lowenfield. Okay, this whole thing that you don't need an ID card.
And it might be fine that it didn't originate from him, but he's supposed to have full knowledge of it.
How could he have full knowledge of the PP corruption efforts?
No, the process. I mean, the process.
He has the process. Everyone, including the ABC and the private sector and so on, claimed there can be no fraudulent voting. There can be no fraudulent voting. There can be no fraudulent voting. But when we went in the box, we saw thousands of fraudulent votes, okay, which is which is evidence of a voter impersonation campaign to the extent of thousands. You can't blame Lowenfield for that. What you have to commend him for, as a professional, is someone having the integrity to say, under my watch, this thing went wrong, okay? And this is what I believe should be done. He said that to GCOM. The PP rejected it. The chairman rejected it. Now the chairman is trying now to have this professional do something that does not comply with the law. Okay? And that is wrong.
Bishop, do you buy that he doesn't have full knowledge and he can be excused for not knowing that there would have been fraud? Do you buy that from the CEO?
So certainly not, Salim. Mr. Lowenfield, at all material times, functioned in his statutory office as a chief elections officer. He is party to all of the decisions that are made. He attends the meetings. He participates in the discussions. The entire recount was done under his hand, even though he was subject to the control and the direction of the commission. Mr. Lowenfield is not an uneducated man. Mr. Lowenfield is dancing to his masters from Congress Place. And let me tell you what is this election rigging plot that Mingo tried with. Declare results even if they are fraudulent. We will get into government and they will have to go to court by way of an election petition to challenge it. And that's all that Mingo sought to do. Declare results, swear in Granger. Even though the PPP win, they will have to go to court by way of an election petition. We were able to stop that. The recount revealed the wickedness. Lowenfield has gone back to that plot of bringing various reports to show the PNC-led APNU-AFC won the elections when they didn't win the elections, to put them in government, so the PPP will have to go by way of an election petition. It is a rigging plot that Lowenfield has participated in with his eyes open. And even if he didn't know beforehand, he knew in the middle because he was called upon to produce his statements to poll. And all he had to do was to sit down in an office with a Madam Chairman and a calculator and take out 2,339 documents and figures and produce it, and he would have seen since the 5th, 6th of March who are the real winners of this election. Now, all the things you see Lowenfield and the others are now claiming about can be asserted and these documents are not there. The district returning officers and the presiding officers has indicated that it was instructions from GCOM for them not to include those things in the boxes. There are video footage of those officers sitting in the Ashman building with bundles of envelopes to turn them into GCOM. Every district returning officer collected the poll books from all of these presiding officers, and it is in the possession of GCOM. During the recount, GCOM did not produce all of the documents. That's an indictment on Mr. Lowenfield and his officers. But my colleague here, James, is trying to blame the PPP for that. 15,000 people were hired and engaged to conduct an election. He is trying to say those 15,000 people collaborated with the PPP to rig an election. Mr. McAllister's party had 2,300 and something activists who sat in those polling stations for the entire election day. And he's saying that those 2,300 activists colluded with the PPP to rig an election. That is the ludicrous argument that my colleague is making. Lowenfield knows exactly what he is doing. He's been obstinate, stubborn, and insubordinate, and action must be taken against him. And that is why the international community, having been patient and observed and have watched all that is going on, have seen the nexus, the acting in concert, the collaboration between the three PNC nominated commissioners at GCOM, Lowenfield and his team, his rigging team in GCOM, and the cabal, Granger and his group, to rig the elections. And that is why everybody in the world has pronounced this is wrong, it cannot happen. It is fraud. And I can't imagine a party that was committing fraud has been bold-faced enough to go and tell the whole world, you know what? It's the other side that is committing the fraud to cheat us. Come on, man. Let's have some shame. Yeah. Let's have some decency here. The fraud is Mingo and Lowenfield, not those voters that lined up to go and vote on March 2nd.
We have a CEO that you're saying is a bit rogue, or a lot rogue, but we do have a chairwoman who is constitutionally appointed with certain powers and certain control of the process. What can we expect any different from Ms. Claudette Singh?
Who are you asking me?
I'm asking Bishop, then I'll ask you the same question too.
All right, it is simple. When the CCJ...
What can we expect from Claudette Singh?
I expect Claudette Singh to follow the law, the Constitution, and the rulings of the CCJ. The CCJ says, number one, Lowenfield has no power whatsoever to invalidate any votes. And secondly, it is GCOM's responsibility to get the CEO to comply with the instructions that they give to him on June 16th. And I believe Claudette Singh is acting properly to ensure compliance with that. It is Lowenfield's rebellion because he knows if he does what is right, his political masters will not get what they have asked him to produce. His political masters have asked him to produce a victory for them, but they have lost the elections. If he does what is right, what is professional, what is objective, he cannot produce what his political masters have asked him to do. And he prefers to be the sacrificial lamb. That is why he's going the way he's going. I believe he'll do what is right and get the results declared.
James, the chairwoman has been very patient, as you can tell. She's allowed things to kind of fall into place over a period of time, and she's still patient with the whole process. What can we expect from her? Because there is no declaration either way, for APNU or for the PPP. What can we expect from her since she is in the seat that will be making the final declaration?
Well, look, I would hope that she would act in accordance with the laws of Guyana. Okay, and I think when Juan made reference to all the rulings of the CCJ, he left out the fact that it said he must follow the Commission's instructions in accordance with the laws of Guyana. Okay, and this matter could have been over already if what Juan is saying is so clear. Because when the CEO wrote the chairman and asked for clarification, it would have been very simple for that legal luminary to just write and say, this is the legal basis for my instruction to you. The fact that she can't do that would suggest to me, and would suggest to almost anyone, that she doesn't feel that she have legal basis. But she's responding to the pressure, to the diplomats that are living in her office every day, to the statements that are being made in capitals in Europe and North America, and she doesn't somehow believe that she doesn't have to follow the law. Now, one was talking about all of these countries that are aligned with the PPP's position. But this is a strange combination of forces. Rob Gonzalez, you can remember one, he was the one who was defending Maduro in Venezuela and saying that no one should interfere in the internal affairs of a country. When the United States was talking about election issues in Venezuela, you could remember that it is the OAS, the very OAS that is very vocal in Guyana, that toppled Evo Morales in Bolivia? And how is that not a big scandal? Evo Morales, the man with 40-something% of the votes, was accused of stealing 0.5% to go 10 points clear, and he wasn't involved in the rerun. But the OAS was involved in that. It was sanctioned by the US. What is happening in Haiti? What happened in Honduras? Okay, so this is a strange combination of forces. But I want to make this point though. And I want us to go all the way to the Ukraine and to see what happened there in relation to how America diplomacy was used to advance personal financial interests of people who were close to the ruling party. Okay? And when you had efforts to remove an ambassador, efforts to fire the CEO of the gas company there in the Ukraine, all of this happened under the cloak of a diplomatic effort, that we are acting in accordance with certain diplomatic principles. Now, Guyana is no longer a country dependent on rice and sugar. We are now fortunate to have discovered oil, and we now have access to that. And I would want to believe that the same way you had Republican operatives running around in Ukraine and trying to influence decisions there for personal financial interests, and you had the State Department back in Washington acting to allow that to happen. You know, one about the case where two guys went to meet the deputy head of the Ukrainian gas company, and they were there sporting open collars with gold chain and so on, and made a promise that they could get supply a certain amount of gas, and then they could have the pipeline from Poland improved so that the gas can be moved from Poland into the Ukraine. The guy looked at them as if they were crazy. So allow me to complete this point. The guy looked at them as if they were crazy. But later on, a number of things started to fall into place. The ambassador to Ukraine was recalled, as these guys said it would cause to happen. The chairman of the gas company was holding off for his dear life. The Secretary of Energy for the United States went to Poland to initiate the deal with the pipeline. And this is all because two men sat in a bar and promised a man, we are going to make these things happen. Now, this...
I would love Bishop to respond to that. Bishop, do you believe there's a greater geopolitical game being played on Guyana's turf?
I am saying...
Sir,
the point I want to make... allow me to conclude. The point I want to make is this. That we are not sure that this is geopolitics. It is quite possible that there are people who are hoping to benefit at the expense of the people of Guyana. We don't know the deals and the promises the PPP made that will cause the United States in this unipolar hemisphere, okay, where the US goes, others follow, to ignore all the corruption in the elections, issues that they would not accept in their elections. They're trying to blind eye it and saying, well, swear in the PPP. It possibly is not geopolitics. It's
So
possible.
let's get a Bishop response on that. Is there a geopolitical battle being raged on Guyana, on Guyana's turf, an expense?
Salim, I can tell you from where I sit, every ranking U.S. official that have visited Guyana in the run-up to elections 2020 that the opposition met with, they have all said these words: we have no interest in which party wins. We have interest in democracy and free and fair elections. And that was made known to us in very straight language, and they have indicated to us that is the exact message that they have given to the government. But Salim, I'm listening to James, and it's the old, tired, worn narrative strategy of attacking the messenger and not dealing with the principle that is at hand. We come a pollster who was engaged by the PNC, APNU-AFC before, in an interview said, elections and winning elections is about numbers. Simple as that. Who get the most numbers? The Americans in 2015 that James is seeking to put in a difficult spot were the ones who played an active role in the 2015 elections, and they called upon the PPPC to concede. The Americans, the British, the Canadians, and the European Union representatives used to be meeting with Mr. Granger and the High Command of the APNU-AFC at their Hatfield Street offices. While we were in government, we knew that. It is normal behavior. They meet with the government, they meet with the opposition. Now, the Americans and the Canadians and the European Union are not on the side of the PPP. They're on the side of what is right. And what is right, if you have lost an election, you concede. You go and you remobilize, you go and you regroup, and you come again. That is what democracy is all about. But this stubborn, despotic, authoritarian, totalitarian approach of believing that you are the Messiah and you have the divine right to rule Guyana, and you're not going to leave office because everything that the PPP did was wrong and evil and wicked, and the devil is siding with them now to get you out. It's not going to work. Even APNU-AFC supporters, James, they are now tired of those arguments. They see the writing on the wall. The election is over. Clear the way. Let the independent GCOM receive the report from Lowenfield, discuss the report, and vote and declare the winner. Why are you standing in the way of a correct report going to the chairman to stop a declaration? Because every court case, every time you do that, the one person who's benefiting is the APNU-AFC and Granger in particular, because they remain in office. Yeah. And I know where James is going. He is one of the persons, without saying it, that he would like to see a non-declaration and new elections, because that is the new narrative that the PNC is trying to push. A non-declaration to have new elections. And that non-declaration to new elections, Granger remains in power, continues to pilfer the public purse, give away state assets to his friends, his family, and his cronies, and Guyana is impoverished. Mm-hmm. There's no deal that is bigger than the will of the people. Even if, and I'm not saying there was, a deal with the PPP and the Americans, the people of Guyana went out there on March 2nd and they said, we want the PPPC to form the next government, and we want the APNU-AFC to be in opposition. And we should listen to the will of the people and let the democratic will be served.
And we have about 10 minutes more to go, and I just want to switch the conversation a little bit. Do we have a GCOM problem in Guyana, or do we have, or is GCOM stuck in the middle of a bigger issue where the two major political parties are for all intent and purposes, ethnic-based parties, and a GCOM, which is meant to mitigate, to moderate between these two giants, are unable to kind of move any direction because either direction could be very dangerous. Do we have, is GCOM a casualty of our current ethnopolitics?
James, Salim, let me go first on this one.
Same question. And if we can give very short answers because we have like 10 minutes.
All right. Let me say this. GCOM became compromised with a unilateral appointment of retired Justice James Patterson as its chairman and the facilitating of political types like the Roxanne Myers to be employed in high positions in GCOM. GCOM became an extension of Congress Place by that action. So when we went to the CCJ to get that appointment revoked and to get a properly installed chairman, there was not enough time to reform GCOM. The political types in the staffing arrangements remain, and that is where the problem is. That politically directed cabal inserted into GCOM for the purpose of rigging an election. This could have been over a long time.
And there must be a reason why a party would want the mediator to be influenced. And James, do you think we have a bigger problem than GCOM?
Yes, I think there's a bigger problem than GCOM, but just let me briefly respond to one about GCOM being compromised. I don't know that GCOM was compromised. Roxanne Myers, Keith Lane, Lowenfield, etc., they have no connection to the APNU-AFC. Okay? But we know that GCOM was compromised before because after serving in GCOM, Dudnat Singh, Gokul Budu, Stanley Singh, they all went to work for the PPP. But I think the issue of GCOM could have been averted if we were allowed to clean the list, if we had given Lowenfield a proper list. And all election experts around the world will tell you the kind of list that we went to the elections with was a recipe for confusion. Okay? And that's what we had. But beyond that, I think that we have to revisit the whole construct of our country. We need to see how we relate with each other. We need to have an appreciation of what are the expectations and fears of the people in the society, and then we have to take the steps to address that. Personally, I believe that we need a period of national reconciliation. Okay, and since in the late 90s, I had proposed this whole issue of a shared governance arrangement, not a permanent arrangement. And I think it becomes even more important now that we have access to greater wealth. We have to do certain things about restructuring, how we do our business, our checks and balances, and so on and things like that. We don't have it. And I'm not afraid of Juan and necessarily the current actors in the PPP, because let's look at the United States of America. The founding fathers didn't cater for the present situation we have now, okay? And as we see the democratic process in the United States of America unraveling every day, we have to look at that and say, do we have the checks and balances to address the possibility of someone coming with the support of a political party and government to clean out the treasury and to just enrich themselves and their family without any concern for public opinion.
But James, if I can interject again and ask both of you again, on every issue politically in Guyana, there's two distinctly different narratives. If you talk about Lowenfield, there's absolutely two narratives. One, he's obedient civil servant with a history, and the other side is like he's a total crook, compromise, and everything else. If you talk about the list, for example, one side believes that the list was bloated. The other believes that no, that list is as clean and we need to run with it as soon as possible. Why is it? And these difference of opinion and the narratives is politically based. It's not grounded in any rationale. You can predict what a PNC person would believe or think or do, and you can predict what a PPP person would think and do and how they'll behave. Now, why do we have this? And I think this has been the recurring decimal in our entire history, where you've got two narratives and they never meet. And I think it's in this election, unfortunately, it has reached a point where neither side wants to give in. And here we are today with an impasse, with the COVID, with pandemic, and with economic issues. People are hungry and not getting food and so on. How do we move forward? Because I believe, and I think a lot of Guyanese on the streets believe, that the issue is these two major political parties are unable to sit at a table. Therefore, GCOM and everything else become casualty. Your thoughts on that, both of you?
Juan, you can go.
All right. I would agree that there is need for the improvement of race relations. But this must not be a cosmetic approach. And when I say the improvement of race relations, we have to build trust among our people, and we stop using race as a platform to get an objective raise. And I have seen from my own individual place where I sit, who are the real ones who use the race card whenever they are pushed in a corner. And I might lose friends for saying that. But whether it was while I was a chairman of the Guyana Council of Churches, I was taken on a plane ride to show all of the disproportionate distribution of the resources in the Guyanese people among the races, and how Afro-Guyanese were not getting lands. And when the same people who took me on the plane ride, I said to them, give me the list of the Afro-Guyanese who didn't get lands, that I could go to the government, Jagdio was president at the time, and confront them and say, why you're not giving these people lands? You know what they said? We don't want the people to get lands. Because if the people get land, the people going to like Jagdio. So who are the people that are using the race card to benefit themselves? I had experience as chairman of the Ethnic Relations Commission, the party that fought and sought to ridicule every effort to improve race relations in Guyana is the PNC. The leader of the PNC took me to court, filed an injunction restraining me from functioning. The PNC, when they came to office, they formed a Ministry of Social Cohesion, which turned out to be a mobilization slush fund for political activism. Race relations is at its worst in the history of Guyana with a Ministry of Social Cohesion, because there was no sense. We need to build trust, and if we're going to talk about issues, we need to be open, we need to be honest, and we need to confront it, and not use race for the purpose of political and political aspirations. And the parties,
yeah. So
in the run-up to the 2010s, as the general secretary, his party was under among Afro-Guyanese, and there was a deliberate outreach to we won the 2018 local government elections. And that is why we got the numbers to win the 2020 elections, because there was a significant grouping of Afro-Guyanese who departed from that race-based politics that supported the PPPC, and that is why we won the elections.
And time is already running out, but James, I want to give you the final word tonight on why do we have two distinctly different narratives, and how do we meet in the middle? Because I think the election that we are experiencing right now is just a friction point. It is just a friction point. It can go either way. But at the end of the day, we've got a nation that has two narratives, and how do we make them meet in the middle?
Well, I think this was injected into our DNA by the British. This problem that we are experiencing here was created by the British, manufactured by the British to manipulate us. And we're seeing that manipulation even today. I don't want to be like Juan to go off and pointing fingers as to who did what, etc. I think Juan, you said Juan and I can't agree on anything, but I think we both agree tonight that there's a problem. Okay, it's a problem that needs to be addressed, and it wouldn't be helped if we start pointing fingers as to who did what and who didn't do.
We must be truthful and factual, at least.
I can be truthful and factual, but I don't want to go there. Okay, because I suffered personally, and so, but I don't want to go there. I think that we need to, as a nation, look at where we are. Look at the jeopardies that are facing us. Now that we have something to protect, now that we have something that others might want, we have to ensure how we can come together as a people. And it is up to the leaders now to carve a path for that to happen. And I return to my position that I believe we need a period of national reconciliation, where we can emerge as a country. Look, for too long we have been poor, and we have been the butt of the Caribbean. We walked through airports and we were put on special benches, and we go to certain islands and people disrespected us and so on. We now have a chance, we have an opportunity to ensure that all Guyanese can walk everywhere with their heads high. It's not going to happen if we continue to be divided. It's not going to happen if people could manipulate us against each other. They are going to emerge victorious. And when we open our eyes, we will see that all we thought was ours, others are enjoying the benefit.
Yeah. Well, then I want to thank you very much, both Bishop and James, for a very enlightening discussion. And we are a mature nation. I think we do control our own destiny. We are sovereign, as my APNU voices reminds me every day that we are a sovereign state. And as such, I think we need to find better ways of resolving our issues rather than just sticking to our narratives, because both narratives have not worked for us for the past 53, 54 years. And a special message also to all those who are tuning in every Monday and Wednesday on this show and all other shows on social media. Please avoid these racial statements and outright lies that you're peddling because you heard it from someone or because you belong to a party. I think after a declaration is made, whether it's next week or next month or next year, we all got to live with each other. And there's 50% of Guyanese who will not be part of the government in the next dispensation. So and it could be you or it could be me. So we've got to be very careful with our language. We have to elevate our language at the most basic level. We are a reflection of our politicians. When our politicians speak vile, it's because we speak vile. So with that, I just want to caution our viewers that when you're making comments, let it be intelligent. Let it be something that's contributing to a better Guyana and to the guests that we bring on these shows. Also, finally, I want to remind everyone that these shows do cost, and if you can make a donation to make these shows continue, you can go to, I think, Globespan 24/7 and make a donation. Thank you very much, Mr. James McAllister. Thank you, Bishop Juan Edghill, for your open, frank discussion. We need more of this, and we certainly will have you again in the near future. Thank you again, and I'm sure we try to make some sense of politics in Guyana today.
Good night, James. Good night, Salim.
And good night.
God's blessings.
All righty.